And I would start with thanking you, Anuj, and it was really a great experience since morning. I've been trying to follow all the discussions and the panel and the speakers. And this virtual exhibition was really my first experience, and I'm really glad. And thank you so much for inviting me to this forum.
Our pleasure,
That's
ma'am. Our pleasure.
yeah, it's very well organized. I think things are working fine. I think this may become the new norm going forward.
Absolutely. You never know.
Yeah, and it's really nice to meet all my fellow panelists on this e-forum. I know Sudhanshu quite well, and we have been meeting in many occasions in the past. But others, I think I'm just meeting for the first time. Glad to meet all of you. I think coming to the context of this panel, I will start with my views on, when we are talking about connected cars. I think every technology that comes into the connected car, I will just touch upon that. And where are we on each of these technologies, and what is that security or the privacy related threats that these technologies are bringing in. I will just try to share my views on each one of them. So when we talk about a connected car solution, engineering solution, as you rightly mentioned, we talk about various components in the connected car, starting from the human machine interface, where the user get to interact with the car, right? And so the whole lot of technology involved in it. Then we have the connectivity part of it, where we talk about the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi, the various stacks, and the integration and testing of each one of them. Followed by, I think we have the telematics modules, and then so these are all software aspects and algorithms like ADAS, then the mobile applications, cloud analytics, platform software, and so these are all software aspects I'm talking. But then there are hardware and silicon aspects also are involved, where you do the PCB design, we do the silicon validation, the ASIC, the SOC, and then all sets of FPGA, board design, hardware design. So a whole lot of technology is involved in building this connected car. Now, when we talk about security aspects, now each one of them, opens up some threat or the other. Okay, and that is where we talk about the security, the standard, the compliance in developing these solutions or these component solutions for the connected car. Now, it can start from I think one of the session of Amit. He quite rightly mentioned the number of ports, the number of interfaces that are opened. Each one of them is vulnerable. But then when I talk about engineering, I talk about when people are writing the code. We need to really check the code that people are writing, how secure it is. It starts from there, and then it goes on, like the various aspects that has been talked so far, in various sessions. So that's how I put it right now, at the basic level of security, which starts from the code level.
But friends, that is the reason why this panel is so special, because these are the techies, these are the engineers, these are the people who write the code, who read the code, who implement the code. They don't just talk hawa mein, and we are very cautious to bring people who really know things, who have worked with their sleeves rolled up and they know the technology. So that was a great start, Ms. Kar. So it boils down to the very code that you're writing. And yes, Mr. Amit Dubey's keynote was very scary. So getting Mr. Kirti in this conversation. So, sir, you've been working with M&M. You have been working at the helm of affairs when it comes to designing of vehicles, electronics. So connected vehicle piece, and Mahindra has been one of the pioneers, amongst the OEMs of connected vehicles. What have been the challenges that you have been facing, and going forward when it comes to privacy, security, what are the caveats and the resolutions to them?
Yeah. Actually, Ms. Kerr is explained from HMI to the total gamut and total systems. No doubt, Mahindra. We actually earlier one of the your keynote speaker he talked about the e-call. Actually, in XUV and in our Scorpio, this feature is already implemented. It is a 10 years old technology. So a lot of people may be not aware of that. So we are supporting our lot of people through the e-call is there, emergency, and a lot of emergency time it is really connected to the people very well. I just wanted to tell you recently what happened just in Chennai. I'm in Chennai and shutdown started on our on long the 24th evening. Then I got the message from my management, "Ki we have to work for the ventilator systems." And I just put that to three people team and started the working. That time I started finding the connectivity. What is the connectivity means to us? Really how connectivity is the important for the and world, and it will be continue. And if you see the vehicle perspective, ma'am started from the HMI perspective. Okay, human machines interface, and it should not be happen ki in our mobiles lot of apps are available, but how many people we are using these apps? What is the usefulness of the systems? So this is the one part. But today I just wanted to touch, there is a lot of the in vehicle, lot of sensors are there. So we start from the sensors, then telematic, then cloud. It will come. Then lot of different applications we can use, and then it will be all the no doubt users are there. So sensors, I wanted ki sensor network is the very important part. It is a small part, but it is very important. So if you see the sensors are stationary. Sensor will be movable, and this is because of that there is a lot of challenges are there. So main one of the challenge, if you see the vehicle perspective, is a power consumption. If these sensors and this telematics should be always keeping on, then if vehicle is parked for like this lockdown period for 40 days, 45 days, your vehicle battery will be get discharged. So that writing the software and what should be strategy of the energy consumption, power consumption. So I can put power consumption is the one of the things in the telematic system, because telematic system should be awake also, but it should not be draw the more lot of current from the systems. So power consumption is the main challenge for us. Second point is I can see fault tolerances. And the fault tolerance is again is a total system. I think Amit is explained very well in earlier session before the lunch. And is fault tolerance is the one very critical. Then scalability is the one. I can see the challenge that we should be really look into that. Then no doubt there is a production cost, availability, and we have to be really look into in India also. When I was just really, I just sorry for adding some of the ventilators projects. When I'm looking for a lot of sensors availability and other things, so we were finding very difficult. It is not available in India, and we have to really look to the US, we have looked to the Germany, we have looked to the all part of the world to get the things within a 2 days and 3 days to mobilize the things. We are able to mobilize, but it is a very challenging finding the in India. So we should be really look into that this hardware things, how we are improving in India, and we are really, we should be dependent, but we should be further work on that. So that is the most challenge. And topology of the networks is the one of the I see the very critical, because lot of sensors on the vehicles, and we can take take lot of the data and lot of inputs, and we can do the lot of analytics which can be useful to the customer, useful to the society also. And no doubt this all things is required total integration of the software. And software is again is a big challenge. If you go to the software, total 5 layers of the software layers, you start with your application layer, to transport layer, to network layer, to your physical layer, and everywhere each and every people are working on that, and combining all the things. And security. So for me, that security is the one of the things. If it is any open nodes are available, and if any sensors are misbehaving, as somebody really passive or active way, it is damaging the sensor, it will be really damage the total vehicle performance, everything will be done. So no doubt we are doing in automotive lot of penetration testings, different type of testing is there, but it will be always will be challenge. With this is the my first view.
So as Mr. Kirti rightly mentioned, there are challenges on the hardware side, there are challenges on the software side, there are 5 layers. So there are challenges of security, and sensors get damaged, and it has a domino effect on the entire, technology that we have. So there are issues. It's not easy. It's easier said than done. And before I forget, Mr. Kirti, a lot of respect for you, for your team.
Thanks.
Goenka, for Mr. Anand Mahindra, for Mr. Kalra and his team for doing this on a war footing basis, the ventilator project. It's really phenomenal. Really, we salute you for this project.
Thanks everyone. Yeah, it is a support to all because it is not single. I can tell you that a lot of people supported it for the lot of all over India and all over global for the logistics also. Everybody come forward to support.
Absolutely, a lot of respect for that. We're really humbled to have companies like M&M in India. Really a matter of pride for us. So, Mr. Mittal, you have worked. You are the Director of Industry 4.0. You have worked on this aspect in India, across the world, and we are proud. You were our partners last year. For the third WAFIT edition. You had shared a lot of things on connected vehicles, the challenges. So first question to you, Mr. Mittal. Have we progressed from the challenges that we had discussed last time? What has been the progress, no matter how incremental it might be? Where is the road ahead on technology for safety and security of connected vehicles specifically?
Since the time that we discussed last year about the challenges where I mentioned standardization, apart from the security as one of the key challenge. Now, the security part is again being addressed by the various solution providers who are developing the security components, security layers in the vehicles. The problem comes as to how you define the word security. Most of the one significant part of the picture is the layers which are inside the vehicle and the connectivity of those vehicles, as we say, to the OEM. But then apart from that, especially for the commercial vehicles, we are also talking about the government being a stakeholder. If I take the example of AIS 140, which has been mandated by the government of India as a necessary implementation in all the commercial vehicles, the vehicle data is actually going to the government of India over there. Now the registration happens with the government servers and data also goes to the government servers. How do you secure that data? How do you use that data? How do you share that data between different agencies? And then at times, and now we are beginning to have a little bit of push from the government side also, where they are looking to start doing the monetization of some of the data after doing the required anonymization. Now, AIS 140 is a standard which is, as I said, mandated, but then there are, at least from the technology players who are developing solutions around that, they have concerns. So since last year, the progress has been that, yes, it is being taken up more actively, that what are the problems and how to address those layers, but then we are actually nowhere near the solution or getting an acceptance that this is the right way to proceed on that front. That is still a road a distant away. The security layers, as we talk about in the connected vehicles, and right now I am limited to talking about the manual vehicles. I am not getting into the autonomous vehicles because there the issues of security becomes far more complex. In this itself, if we look at the, I see two key parts here in this security picture or the data picture here. Security is one part of that. The other part is standardization, because unless we have the standardization about how the data, so within the vehicle, the data can be collected in proprietary manner. But then from vehicle to the connectivity part, as we are talking about, let's say I'm a fleet owner, for instance. I have 2,000 vehicles which are traversing the country. Now, for my connectivity part, and I may have bought vehicles from different players, some from, let's say, Ashok Leyland, some from Tata, some from Mahindra, different players. Now those different players may have their own solution providers. Now I do not like the idea of having to deal with different solution providers for my vehicles when it comes to my day-to-day operation. I want to have a single layer. I want to have a single platform where I can go and access all the services. But then the problem is the solutions do not talk to each other. There is no standard layer available to me. There is no standard platform available to me because I may not want to depend upon the platform being provided by one of the players here. I say that no, I don't like your platform. I have this particular vendor whose platform I want to use, and you please connect to that particular platform. If you do not have the standardization, then how is it going to work? Everyone will be having their own solution and doing their own customization, and then perhaps for me do their own tweaking. But then the moment I start going to the fourth vendor, then I again have to go through the whole picture once again. That's one of the biggest challenge which is there. The second part comes in the form of value-added services. And to an extent, it is again, I covered there by having an independent platform. But in the similar manner, like we have these value-added services available on the phone. We get all sorts of service notifications when we have the phone connected, which use some of the phone services or the data being provided by the service operators. If I'm a third-party service developer, and let's say I want to provide a part of the committee or task group in the Industrial Internet Consortium, where they have a automotive task group, which is getting into this area of standardization and the security and everything. But within the country, there is no, I mean, I'm not able to see too much of work into that, although we have tied up with SIAM. And standardization and the security are some of the key areas that SIAM says that they want to work with us on those. So I expect that going forward, we'll start having the progress on these, but these are the key challenging areas that I see here.
So Mr. Mittal spoke very nicely on the requirement of standardization of services. If I'm a fleet operator, I cannot be going to 5 people, 10 people. It's very confusing. It can also be, insecure because there are so many layers, and it just doesn't make sense. It'll just, mitigate or stop the penetration and the adoption of connected vehicle solutions. So if we would like to get Dr. Ramachandra in the conversation, who is, spearheading at a cutting edge on these connected vehicles technologies. So Mr. Ramachandra, we would like to hear from you. What are the technologies that we would be seeing in next 5 years, 10 years when it comes to connected vehicles? How would they stack up when it comes to safety, security, performance, and which other technologies that you would bet on?
Yeah, good afternoon. So let me start with to answer your question, some context to this. So the ecosystem of connected vehicles. So why security is most important, and why it's going to be a challenge for technology developers, especially with the connected vehicle and also the future connected autonomous connected vehicle. So the threats in this ecosystem is, it's because it is connected. There are multi parties into this. The connected car is connected to, for example, the services segment, in which the vulnerabilities in services is going to happen. Their services, their servers, application server sitting somewhere, and things like that connected to the car. Then the car manufacturers, auto dealers, then value-added service providers. Then you have the third party, like it could be insurance, it could be many other people. And apart from that, infrastructure support in terms of traffic infrastructure. Then any other government-related, regulatory related connectivities that are part of this network. So in this ecosystem, what are the different types of threats that are possible? So theft of personal data. Then because once you hack into a car or a backend server which stores a lot of data about this, then pretty much, in fact, instead of connecting to the car, if someone connects to the server which has the network of various cars, right, that will be much more lucrative for the hacker to get all the data in one place. Then the next one is the most fearsome stuff is the vehicle test itself. With the digital keys, then the wireless key fobs and the mobile applications, using mobile, you can operate the car and things like that. But basically, the traditional security is going to be replaced by electronic security. And anybody who hacks into this can get an unauthorized entry into the vehicle. And using this, managing this virtual car keys, it can become a cumbersome process, and it's more difficult than managing the physical keys. So of course, for everything you have, it's a double-edged sword. You get advantage, and also it comes with a set of disadvantage. And the connection risk is like we are talking about the connection risk in terms of basically, people could exploit flaws into the vendor's implementation of networks, and they can easily hack the network and then remove the connections and do whatever they want. A lot of issues pertaining to connection risk. Then manipulation of safety critical systems. So like the braking system or steering, all these things can be hacked. And there are more than so many ECUs in the car, and the future cars are going to have several hundreds of ECUs. and the code's running into about 300 million lines of code. You don't know, you will not know where the hacker would have gone and fiddled with the working code. It becomes very difficult. It's not going to be easy to find where things have changed. Then mobile application security vulnerability, because mobile, the car of future is extension of your home or extension of your office. So in this way, it will be seamless. Like whatever you're doing in your mobile, you can do in your car. Whatever you're doing on a computer, you can do it in your car. So like it will be the life will become seamless because of the connected world. And because of which the amount of threats that you're going to have is going to increase, multiple folds.
Right, Dr. Ramachandra. So now we are even more scared now. पहले अमित भाई ने डरा दिया, आपने डरा दिया हमें. So what are the technologies that we can actually use to avert, prevent, minimize these attacks from hackers? What should be the preventive measures for the industry? What should they bet on now?
Yeah, so the most important thing is the way cars are designed today. I mean, people use various coding standards. It's pertaining to, safety part is given more, I would say, stressed more in the current system. They use AUTOSAR or ASIL kind of coding standards, and getting, to ensure that, the system doesn't hang. A system, whenever there is a problem, it will gracefully exit or raise some kind of alarm so that, the systems have safe path to get out of any existing bugs or flaws or whatever it is. But then this is not going to be enough, because since it is going to be connected, anybody can hack into any of your ECUs, and especially in autonomous car, and a car can be converted into a rogue car. I mean, because there's no driver in the car, hacker can hack into the autonomous vehicle, and then he can convert that into a virus on the road, a moving virus on the road. It can do whatever it wants, So that will be a very scary stuff. So I am part of world's first autonomous vehicle safety standards called Underwriter Laboratories UL 4600. I'm the only one from India. And we have, just April 1st, we released this standard to the world. So this is going to be, talking about, the architecture in terms of how the system has to be designed from the ground up, in terms of the safety against all kinds of threats that are going to come in. And the most important one, the decision, the design decisions that are taken up in terms of building the thing, what is called as designed in security. So there's also a lot of rigorous security testing that is done from the architecture level. So we do the security as a part of the architecture design, then each and every module, so that systems are going to become more and more safe. And then traceability of their functions and things like that. So any hostile environment, anything that coming up, there will be a lot of policing inside the system, which can detect the malfunction or a malware coming and trying to fiddle with this, or somebody hacking into this. It can be easily identified, and then the car can be controlled or taken over before the hacker takes over. There is an autonomous system which can take over and then connect to the backend system to notify that this particular car has a vulnerability. Somebody has hacked in or something like that, so that the all other critical functions will be shut off, such that the hacker will not get access to enter the other systems quickly before things happen. So this is basically it has to be done at the design level. Start with the design of design and architecture of that.
Sure. So that's a very important point.
What we call it as, the only way to do this is secure by design. So,
yes.
And that way we build a robust in long term.
True. So, Dr. Ramachandra, that's a very important point. It has to be secure by design. It has to be secure at the architecture level. So, Miska, having you back in the conversation. So, Dr. Ramachandra has shared a lot of things that already are on about the standards for safety, security. Something, just the way the bank grade security is there, you cannot really, it's not that easy to hack into a bank unless you are stupid, you know the password, it is happy123 or ABCD, or if you have sent a link to the, customer, and the customer only gives you the details. That's how mostly, your accounts get hacked. Otherwise, there's the bank grade security, which the entire world knows it's bank grade. Can we have that kind of a security in connected vehicles? And what sort of technologies for powering connected vehicles in general do you see coming in next 5 years?
So I think the most of the speakers since morning and the sessions have been talking about what are those areas which are prone to the security hacks, right? And is it possible that we tighten the security, in each of those hacking potential points? And so when we talk about the potential points, I think. It crosses across the solution component, like as I said, the application, the communication, the hardware level security. So all of these are vulnerable, right? And so when we talk about the dashboard, the vulnerability in the dashboard itself is can be exploited. The cloud applications, which are like the storage of the data, which is getting filled as and when the user is using this connected car. There could be misleading information being presented there, right? So that can lead to some wrong decision making. There could be some fatal mistakes. Wrong decisions can take us through some traffic crossing, which is not advisable. So many of these can happen, and I think the previous speaker has said it has to start in each of these components, in the application, the communication, the hardware level. It starts with the design, and whether can we make it foolproof 100%. I think it will happen over a period of time. And people will learn, okay, these are the areas which we could not design. They could not think of those design aspects or those scenarios. Sitting today, we don't know what scenarios coming 5 years down the line. For example, in fact, I was thinking about the compatibility issues. See, today we are talking about my connected car, let's say, is connected to my smartphone, but and through Bluetooth. But 10 years down the line, my smartphone may not have Bluetooth in it, and whereas I'm not changing my car in 10 years, right? Then what happens? I'm changing my smartphone every 2 3 years. A car is not getting changed, so that itself will bring in a lot of these aspects. So maybe that is just one scenario I'm telling. There could be many more scenarios which will keep coming in, and the solutions will come up as and when we start to we'll face this.
Right, sure. So I think we have spoken a lot on the hacking part and the security part of the connected vehicles. Now talking a bit on traffic management and on safety. So Mr. Kirti would like to get you in the conversation. Mr. Sethi had mentioned in his keynote about the V2X communication, V2V, V2I, and also that, what I also mentioned, the DSRC, the short range communication, which can happen. So, if there's a pedestrian, typically people these days, I saw in Chennai, this was like 10 years back, I saw at the traffic signal, there was this road sign put up by the Chennai traffic police: do not be on your smartphone while crossing the road. They had put it up 10 years back. So I'm crossing the road and I'm on my WhatsApp or on my smartphone. There's a car coming from here. Seconds before a possible collision, I get a notification. The guy in the car also gets a notification. Similarly, V2I, vehicle to infrastructure. We all know that at times it's a road design, the infra design. There is no central body on designing. We have a body to approve a ketchup sachet. We don't have a body to ensure that the roads made after renovation or change are right. So this V2V, V2X, V2I communication, you think how soon can we see it? Are you working on it? Can it really help in saving lives and enhancing productivity?
Yeah, actually, challenge is that first thing, Anuj, this standardization, what Mr. Sudhanshu was talking about, we should have put together. We have to bring some synergy in all the people. But we were in Mahindra, we are thinking something like that. If I'm I am collecting some data from Chennai to going to the city, and there is a lot of signals are there, a lot of potholes there, a lot of speed breaker is there. If I take that input and give to the cloud and in the server, and a lot of people can be use that that data. Okay, in this road there is a construction is going on, or there is some big traffic is there, or so many speed breakers are there, so that people can get the early warning. Okay, you don't drive fast because another 50 meter or 100 meters there is a speed breaker, or there is a big pothole is there. This type of work is going on, and it is very easy, but no doubt challenge is there, everyone to really come together and share this data. And this data is available, it should be available for each and every persons. That's the, I think that's the one challenge. Really, as a national level, we should be build this data together, and that will bring the everybody help, and really getting that data. And then it will really it should not be key data is belongs to Mahindra or belongs to XYZ somebody. So I think we need to be really work together, get all the when vehicles are going, collecting the data, that should be fit in the cloud, and that will be really useful. So what are you talking to vehicle to infrastructure? We actually we are AS 140. One of the, I think, is the good initiative from the government to really start the getting, and few of the state I came to know, like Delhi, Kerala, they are working on that. These are the good with AS 140, a lot of data we can collect, and that can be open source to the a lot of the people to really to use that that way also we can really look. And but we have some time to really to vehicle to infrastructure to work. I think it is needed lot of work.
Sure, Mr. Kirti, that was really valuable. So we would like to also invite entrepreneurs, innovators. So that's an invitation from Mr. Kirti, that we all need to come together to work on that geospatial piece of getting all this on the map. And I think, by the way, if we start putting potholes on the map, our phone will just drain out on notification, one after the other. Huh? So, yeah, that could be a positive feedback to the authorities.
I think now India roads are not that bad here.
The highways are much better for sure, but the inside roads, which are with the municipal, I think they still need a long way to go.
So, a lot of speed breakers are there in different shapes and size, actually, so people can get that right.
Most of them are non-spec. So on request of a few participants, we would like to pose this question again to Dr. Ramachandra on the standards that he mentioned he's working on. If you can elaborate on those standards, people really want to know about that. Dr. Ramachandra, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, what is the question exactly?
Yeah, I hope it's not too classified, and if in public interest, you want to share some details on those standards that you're working on, which you mentioned.
Yeah, basically I'm working on a standard, the world's first autonomous safety standard called UL 4600. So basically, there is already existing standards as part of safety standards as far as ISO 26262 and ISO PAS 2144, right, and things like that. But those are mainly for the safety standards for ADAS or any of the ECUs that are built in the existing car, but not particularly autonomous vehicles. So that's why we felt that it's needed to start with some standard in autonomous, because autonomous is going to be the future of connected car. And so this was driven by Underwriting Laboratories, and I'm one of the stakeholders in that from India. And of course, we have about 250 people across the world working on that. And we have released the standard on 1st of April this year. So we worked for almost a year or so, and it has now come into standard. So what is the difference between the existing standard 26262 and UL 4600? Basically, UL 4600 concentrates on ensuring the valid safety case. Now, whether the safety case includes basically three elements that we talk about, the goals, argumentation, and evidence. So goals describe what it means to be safe in a specific context. see, because there is no driver in an autonomous vehicle, you need to define the use case. So basically, the safety cases are defined against which the autonomous vehicle is supposed to, any technology, autonomous vehicle technology has to showcase if it has to pass the test, get the certification, that it has to take this safety cases and show for the given specific contest the level of safety. Like it should not hit the pedestrian is one of the things. Then element safety requirements such as ensuring computing chip produces correct computational result despite potential transient hardware faults. These are the edge computing level. Then the other one, basically in terms of goals, in terms of arguments that we return to explain why a goal is achieved. Vehicle level argumentation that the systems can detect and avoid pedestrians, including the ones that are unusual or appear in the roadway from behind the obstacles, occluded people, or occluded by some other object and things like that. So basically, the evidence, you need to provide the evidence in terms of all these things are with all this, when we inject all this stuff into the system, it is still able to come out of the thing. So the whole premise is it is goal-based and technology-agnostic standard, in which we don't talk about whether you are using a LiDAR or whether you're using just a camera like Tesla. What kind of it could be anything, but then this talks about in terms of the use cases and the goals.
Great. So I hope that would have answered the question of the participants, and we have also put out a link in the chat of what Dr. Ramachandra was sharing about. So getting Mr. Mittal back in the conversation. Mr. Mittal, your points on standardization of the connected vehicle technology has been spoken and referred to by all the speakers in this session as well as in the earlier ones. So when it talks about those standards, which Dr. Ramachandra mentioned, that they are tech agnostic, and also the layers which people have to go through, as was mentioned, what can be the quick fixes for standardization of connected vehicle technology as of now?
The quickest fix possibly would be the different solution providers to come together and develop a common API layer. So that, the objective at this point of time that I had mentioned was that the communication from the vehicle, so from the user perspective, there is a standard layer using which they can access their data and on which the third party player can come and develop an augmented solution. So the quickest way to that would be, in fact, that's the only way, because this is the kind of thing which generally cannot be left to the government, because more often than not, they will not have the requisite technical knowledge to be able to do this kind of work. So the industry players, the technology solution developers have to come together and develop a common API layer, define a common API layer, not necessarily develop, but define a common API layer, and which provides a single data access in terms of reading and writing the storage of data. And then subsequently, the look and feel part can be customized for the individual users. So that's the only way to move forward onto that. Otherwise, we'll have the whole lot of, as these connected vehicles proliferate, and they are not going to wait, the proliferation of vehicles is not going to necessarily wait for the standardization to come through. We will have multiple standards, or every users coming, every solution developer developing in their own way. And then subsequently, we'll keep having all these complaints all together, which is going to hamper the proper adoption or even the proper utilization. Because as a user, I will say that, okay, this is too big a pain for me. Let me just look at the bare minimum that I need to do, and beyond that, I don't really care about the services. So it's going to be stifling for the market to grow.
Okay, so Mr. Mittal, here is a question. That if we just leave it to the industry to come together, then there could also be a few vested interests at play. And then who all are supposed to come together and share the data? Is it the fleet operators? Is it the people who install that AIS 140 equipment? Or is it the end consumer? Is it the OEM? Is it the dealers? Because, won't it be better if the government or some quasi-government agency is involved, which will ensure prudence in the system so that the sharing is done in an ethical and in an unbiased way? and nobody takes undue advantage.
So for it to be formally adopted, the government will have to play a role. There is no if and but about that, because otherwise it will remain only the optional choice. The mandatory part of the picture can come only through the government directive, and they have to come and play a role. Now, having said this, who shares the data? Now that's a big problem. The fundamental problem of who owns my data. I mean, I am a vehicle owner. My vehicle has all these technology components which are providing the connectivity. My vehicle is generating a whole lot of data. The question is, who is the owner of that particular data? Am I the owner or of the data? Is it the vehicle manufacturer, the OEM, that entity which is the owner of data, or is it the solution providers who have deployed those components? They are the owners of the data. That's a very basic question, and as of now, there is no answer to this particular question. Even if I do not take the connected vehicle, let me take a simpler example. Today, all those vehicles, the car, which are advanced car, with their ECU capabilities and everything, they generate a whole lot of data. In other words, the data is available that when I take my car for the servicing, I believe that I can get the information about the oil condition, which is actually there, and perhaps some wear and tear data also, and also tuning data and all. Now, all the data I just cannot touch. Okay, I take my car and to the service station. The service station says that, okay, you have done 5,000 kilometers, 6,000 kilometers, or 6 months or 8 months since the last service, and your oil has to be changed. There is no attempt at checking the condition of the oil, whether oil really needs a change. There is no attempt at checking the condition of any of other components where they say that, okay, you have done this much or this many kilometers. Now you have to go and change for those. They simply say that, okay, my computer shows me that you have done this much since your last service or since that change and all, and this is what you need to do, and you go ahead and do that. The fact is that this data is available to tell me, and then for them, of course, it's a revenue model. I mean, the more they change the oil and the other components, more money they make in their shops. But then, and I'm not in a position to really question them effectively. I can only question them on the basis of my experience that, okay, you said 10,000 kilometers, but then I know that while the vehicle manufacturer specifies 10,000 kilometers, it actually means that it is going to be good for at least 20,000 kilometers. Or that I have been running those 10,000 kilometers in normal conditions within the city only, and I'm sure that my oil is not so bad. It can last for another 5,000 or 8,000 kilometers easily. Then I don't really have a data to back up my solution. Data is all available, but I cannot access it. So the fundamental question is, who owns the data? And I said the government will have to come and play a role into that, because once we say that this entity owns the data or that entity owns the data, how it is to be shared, what kind of anonymization has to be done into that, what privacy issues will come. So the government has to play a role into that.
Right. So before the government plays a role and before the privacy bill comes into it, so Mr. Kirti, if you would like to share some of your experiences as to how at your telematics division or how at your dealer end, consumer end, you have been answering this basic question, who owns my data?
Actually, that discussion panel is already discussing, and it is always challenge who owns the data. No doubt there is a data is of the customer actually whose vehicle is there, so that his personal data. That is the one category you can see. Second category you see on the vehicle side. Vehicle, what is the vehicle data is there? Okay, so if I just take these two data, so it is really very important as a OEM. We should not be really use personal data for any purposes. Okay, and if in the vehicle there is some challenges are there or something is required for his safety or his for like oil replacement, that example Mr. Sudhanshu was talking about other things, we should be really upfront inform him, okay, your oil and your oil quality is really not good, you please replace the oil and other things. So team is, we are working on this particularly in these two domains. Vehicle side, we are taking the ownership and we are conveying to the customer when he needed to replace the things. So in the future, this all the sensors, different type of sensors will check. Today, lot of time, lot of the vehicle platform, we are not monitoring lot of the things, but in the future we will start monitoring each and every parameters. So from the powertrain, we are getting a lot of the inputs, and based on that, we are giving to the input to the customer in advance and informing them, okay, you go to the dealer for dealer to go and service your vehicles. So a lot of ways there, a lot of diagnostic trouble codes are available. With that, our call centers, they are really informing to the customer and taking care of that. But there is a system, but it need lot of further different type of sensor to monitor the life of the oil, quality of the oils. This type of lot of sensors also further needed built in the vehicles to really to monitor each and every kilometer, each and every quality of the oil to be predicted. So it will come to the predictive things, and in future is we are looking for the predictive. It is, you can say, predictive. We have to give the predictive maintenance or predictive call to the customer. Okay, this is the threshold of your vehicle. Now it is create a problem, and you go to the dealer and things. So slowly, right now it is a thumb rule is there 10,000, 5,000 kilometer, but in slowly it will happen. Ki vehicle will run in different location, different condition, and then maybe deterioration happen in different condition. In winter, vehicle may be deteriorate different way and or function different way. In high temperature zone, it may be working differently. So these things will be captured, and it will be give the prediction to the no doubt. Ultimately, customer is the, for us is the customer is the main thing. If we are doing all the things and we are not conveying to customer, no use for us. It should be value to the customer.
I hope there is no indication, at cold temperature, if there is a cold start problem, the car starts vibrating and shaking. Customer get to know, गाड़ी को ठंड लग रही है, देखो, गाड़ी. Well, jokes
apart. Fortunately, in India we are not that subgroup temperatures.
Okay.
That is.
I know we have seen people in Leh Ladakh, burning a small fire under the diesel tanks. So, last few minutes of this discussion before we open up to Q&A, Ms. Kar, last few remarks from your end, 60 seconds if you want to say something, then we move to Q&A.
Yeah, I think we are in a very challenging times now with this COVID-19, right? So, and in your agenda, I also saw a few questions on that, and I want to really speak something around it, and also the open systems like Android, how it can help. So two points I will just cover as closing remarks from my side. I think autonomous vehicles, the connected cars, would definitely help us in post C19 with delivery of essentials, and also the social distancing will somewhere will be ensured if we are going for driverless autonomous cars. Other point which I want to cover is on the Android open system. So if we go for a open system like Android for connected cars, autonomous cars, I think it will definitely foster a lot of collaboration, leading to community-driven, faster stabilization of the system. On the other side, it may also get vulnerable to hackers and with the full access to the source code. So it will have some issue there. But overall, I think in a longer term, the open systems could be better suited for a higher stability, interoperability, which we talked a lot on, and of various vendor components, third parties, and cheaper solutions.
Surely, Ms. Kar, that absolutely. So I'm very happy you brought up both these points: the post-COVID era, the new normal, and if there can be an Android-like system. I know it's easier said than done, but if we can have it, and even Mr. Mittal had referred to that. We need all the stakeholders to come together for standardization, and it cannot go forward without government and quasi-government bodies. So NASSCOM, FICCI, ASDC, SIAM, we can go on, ACMA, World Order Forum. We all need to come together to save lives. We all need to come together so that can be a new revenue model. It can help us get the cash flows post-COVID. So friends, now we enter into the Q&A. You can raise your hands if you have any question, and meanwhile, I'll just get in our lovely ladies, Anita and Mohini, back to the stage, as we call it. This is our virtual stage. Anita ji, has she logged out? I can't see her. Okay, while she gets back. Okay, you're already there. Perfecto. So we have a question. We already have a question. And that is from Mr. Nair again. So Mr. Nair, I'm allowing you to talk. So please speak. Please share your question now.
All right. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you because it was a really interesting session. And yeah, my question is directed towards Mr. Mittal, as he is the closest to the government regulatory body on these matters. My question is more on the, is there a philosophical thought process on when will be a right time to introduce a standard for an upcoming technology? Is there a thought process on that? Because any early introduction of these standards or regulations really kills the speed and the out-of-the-box connect to an innovation. People who have not been succumbed to that, for example, Tesla vis-a-vis the large other OEMs, right? Being nimble on the feet and coming out of the box innovation is very important, a need of the hour. Also, there is a market play that allows to make certain changes required when standardization is not possible. For example, as Ms. Kaur was saying about the Bluetooth experience, Bluetooth dying out in the mobile phone technology 10 years down the line, the car will still have it. We have seen this kind of things being played out in the market. For example, the audio jack. So there is a wireless connectivity to the audio jack for people who wants to play music from audio jack. So there's an off-market play who can fulfill the requirements. So is there a thought process like that in organizations like NASSCOM on when is the right time to introduce standards, and whether it will be burdening on new technologies if standards are...
Fair enough. That's a great question. So that's to Mr. Mittal.
Yes, its question is to me.
Yes, yes.
So let me try to address this question. So at NASSCOM Center of Excellence for IoT, and it's largely staffed by technocrats who come from that industry background. The idea around the right time for introducing the standard thought process is this. It cannot be right in the beginning, because at this point of time, you have no idea what shape technology is going to take. So whenever new technology is coming, and we have seen this happening repeatedly, that whenever there is new technology getting into the market, initially there will be resistance to its acceptance, or there may be hype around this. Some people will start accepting it. There is a potential. Then multiple people will start doing their own development. And then once they start doing their own development in their own proprietary way, then they will start coming together to develop the standards. That, okay, I cannot do everything on my own. Let me try to work on standardization. Now, this kind of thing only will happen if there are many people or many players who are developing working on that particular technology. If that is not the case, then the standardization, there will be no concept of the standardization. If you look at the history of this Blu-ray versus high definition, which was, I think, way back from 20 years back or something like that, and there were two separate players who are working on that, one working on the Blu-ray and one working on the high definition, and ultimately Blu-ray got accepted. The high definition video of that time did not get acceptance. But then there were only two players, so one took the market and the other one was forced to follow that. But when there are large number of players, and we can see this any of the area, when there are large number of players developing technology modules which eventually have to come together to be able to build a solution, they will be forced by the market forces themselves, forced to come together and try to define a standards. So that's how this is. You cannot really say that that whenever there is a new technology coming in, there should be upfront work on setting up the standard, because at that point of time, you don't even know whether that technology is going to get the sufficient traction in the market or not going to get the traction. So once it comes, start getting adopted, multiple people start doing the solution development. That is the time when the standardization activity starts taking place. So looking at it from the perspective of the connected vehicle, it is the right time. It is definitely not late. In fact, we are already late in coming up with the standardization layer, but it's definitely not early to work on the standard layer for this.
Great. So just like human beings, even technologies need to prove themselves to be made a standard. All right.
Yeah.
The next question is by Mr. Sahil Bangia. Sahil, please ask your question now.
Hi everyone. My question for the panel members is that in current cars we have Bluetooth enabled infotainment, which takes our phone contacts and other data. Given that the security right now in cars is not of a high level, how vulnerable is that data to hacking? And is there any security system for that?
That's a very good question, Sahil. So, any specific person it's targeted to, or it's free for all? So,
I think Amit is already given. When you are really selling or giving to the car to anybody, please clean all the things. No doubt, if connectivity is not there, then it is your vehicle key is with you. Everything is with you, so it will be really not matters. What I can say, think. But if vehicle is having a connectivity, then no doubt there should be all the security layers, and all the OEMs are working to ensure that it should not be transmit or go to anywhere. But if your vehicle no connectivity is there, then I don't think it is a risk because it is belongs to your property. It is with you only. I don't know. I answered your question, or it is with the connectivity.
well, in fact, there was a very famous Bluetooth hack attack a couple of years back, in which there was this person. What he would used to do, a lot of times we leave the Bluetooth on, or it's by default on all our systems. Even in my wife's car, the Bluetooth is on by default in the entertainment system. So what it'll do, it'll plant itself in the in the app in the backend and keep listening to your conversations, take away your phone contacts. And there was one hacker who, in the middle of the night, had also got access through the Bluetooth to the horns. So couple of blocks, couple of hundreds of cars, horns started blaring in the middle of the night altogether because of this hack. If you Google, you'll find a lot of stuff on this. So yes, Bluetooth is a very easy to do. It's like a low hanging fruit when it comes to hackers. You just Google how to hack Bluetooth. You find so much stuff on the internet. So it is a big responsibility to the people who make standards, to the government, to the OEMs, to make this more foolproof, because this is taken as a given. It's just a Bluetooth. I'm just connecting it for my song, but you just might be opening up yourself to a vicious attack.
Bluetooth range is less. That is the one benefit right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think LoRa and 5G could be better, but Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, they're all vulnerable. If a 14-year kid also can hack it, if the hacking mindset is there.
Yes, and I think even the app Arogya Setu uses Bluetooth to gives you heads up if there are any COVID positive patients around you with their Bluetooth on in their phones.
Yeah.
All right. Any further questions we can take now? Or are we okay? All right. So any last few comments from the panelists you want to share? Something which you feel, it was something which was left unsaid. Please feel free. It's your time now. So Ms. Kirti, Mr. Kirti, Ms. Kar, Dr. Ramachandra, Mr. Mittal, anything you want to say? Last 1 minute, please feel free.
I think what we have to be thinking, only one line I just wanted to tell you. After this COVID things, taking things for the granted, it's really always we are thinking everything is with us, and people was really take everything for the granted. I think that is we should be really look into that. Today we are looking for the ventilators and other thing. We are getting so much of oxygen, but nobody knows really from where I am getting the airs. And when that guy is going to the hospital and ICU, then he's realizing really what is the importance of this. So we should be grateful. We should be gratitudeful for the nature, and we should be really follow the social distancing, and we should be really disciplined.
That's well said, Mr. Kirti. Coming especially from you, a company which has pioneered in making thousands of ventilators at when the nation needs the most. Yes, we need to know where the air is coming from, actually and literally.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Great. So thank you so very much, fellow panelists. It was really a pleasure and an honor listening to you. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. So, dear participants, this is the time you can thank our panelists right now for the knowledge that they have shared. Any feedback you want to give, please feel free to give. If you have liked this session, please give your feedbacks now on the chat.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Ms. Kar. This was a really enlightening discussion. And Mr. Kirti, your last note is very, very important. Nature is healing itself. And I think we need to pay heed to that and not go back to our old ways once this is past. So thank you very much, ma'am and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Thanks, Anuj.